Hi, I'm Susan.
And I'm Wilfrid. Welcome back. And today we're going to talk about what makes a book collectible.
Yes, one of the most often asked questions
Exactly.
is why is this book valuable? Why is this collected? And we're going to try and answer that.
I think we should take it in some sort of order, and that
Okay.
is first thing is the desirability of the book. To put it bluntly, somebody has to want it for whatever reason.
It might be an author that is heavily collected. You're going to have a book of Conan Doyle's.
Yeah, or a subject.
I brought out one that I like, and I hope somebody else will. It's an essay on superstition, and subtitle includes the physical influence on the mind in the production of dreams, visions, ghosts, and other supernatural appearances. Whether anybody else will, I like it, so I think it's collectible. And isn't that a big part of it?
Of course, personal taste is a huge part of it. In fact, nobody else has to like it, just you.
And if you're lucky, nobody else does like it, and you'll get it cheap.
The second point to raise is the availability of the book, or to put it again more bluntly, how scarce is it?
Mm-hmm.
Is it easy to find?
Well, perfect example are the J.K. Rowling books. The first book is extremely difficult
The
to
Harry
find.
Potter book, yeah.
Harry Potter's, in any condition. And that goes for thousands of dollars in good condition,
And even thousands of pounds.
and even thousands of pounds. And the last book, because so many people were collecting it, was printed in huge numbers, now sells for
$50 or $60.
in excellent
Yeah,
condition.
for a first edition, absolutely.
So that's a perfect example of scarcity.
Next would be the thing to consider would be the condition of the book. Probably having established the first two, condition is the most important aspect, I think. And you can look for a fine copy of a book and say and hold out for that. Or in this, here's a case in point. I bought what I think is an interesting, scarce book in terrible condition, no covers, but it's the first book in English on the poisons of snakes. This is an edition from 1708. I bought it fairly cheaply because I think I can find a binder to put a nice binding on it
And bring it up to this kind
and
of
make
condition.
it into a collectible copy.
Yes, and it is a very important book because Mead was the first one who figured out how snake venom is injected
With the fangs.
with the fangs. Great plate on the fangs if you like snakes, by the way. Another piece in condition with calf bindings or any leather bindings is, are they decorative? That will change the whole thing. If you're buying it as an artifact and you want something beautiful, you want something like that. So it's all subjective again.
Sure. Pleasing to the eye, that's important because you're going to be looking at these books for a long time.
Okay. Next point.
Having established those, comes probably the most important from our point of view, I mean yours and ours, and that is, can we afford it? In other words, what's the price?
Well, that's something that goes book by book.
Indeed. Some people will go for, if they don't have a copy, and at the risk of repeating what I might have said in previous talks, they might go for a cheap copy just to have one, and then upgrade from there.
Assuming they can find one.
Assuming they can find one. In other words, be better off with something in hand, bird in the hand, worth two in the bush.
There you go. Now, another thing that you need to think of, in particular with modern firsts, is does it have its dust jacket? This I have out actually for another reason, but we'll use it. Margaret Atwood's The Testaments. It's her last book.
Her latest book, yes.
Or last but one, something
Yeah.
like that. A modern first edition must have its dust jacket. If it does not, the value of it drops considerably. And in something as new as this, it really has to be perfect. In older modern first editions, a few little nicks, a few closed tears might not be as important.
Yeah, it can be tolerated.
Can be tolerated.
It really is a personal thing. How if you think this looks good to me, I can live with it, and you're probably going to have to, then buy it.
Right.
If you can afford it.
Next thing is there's something called an association copy or an association value. It can take several forms. Let me do one first. One I'm going to bring out first is Tennis as I Play It by Maurice E. McLaughlin, I think.
McLaughlin.
Yes, McLaughlin. I'm calling this an association piece because I know it was ghostwritten by Sinclair Lewis, the author of Babbitt and some of the other novels, and the first American to win, I think, the Nobel Prize for Literature. So I want this because I know it's got that Sinclair Lewis connection.
And
knowledge,
I wanted it.
and knowledge is an important thing.
I wanted it because one of our specialties is books on tennis.
There you go. And your association copy, though, is a little
Can you
more
just move those over?
spectacular.
Here's an interesting association copy. Association meaning some connection with the author. In this case, it's Conan Doyle's Memories and Adventures, and it's not a first edition, it's a second edition. But this second edition is more important than a regular first edition because it was one of 100 copies given by the publisher, the editor of the Strand magazine, Greener Smith, to winners of a competition that they laid out in the Strand magazine, asking readers to list their favorite Sherlock Holmes adventures in order of importance to them, and comparing it with a list that Conan Doyle himself wrote. And there were 1,000 copies. Prize was 1,000. First prize was one of 100 copies signed by Arthur Conan Doyle.
Out of a total 1,000 copies of the edition.
Yes. Here you can see it signed by Arthur Conan Doyle, and the publisher's card at the front with the compliments of the editor of the Strand magazine. So here's a case where the book is not a first edition, but in this particular case, more important than a first edition.
And that's a copy in your private collection that you bought many, many, many years ago.
Yes.
Another thing we ought to talk about a little bit is books that are published in various countries. Maybe not simultaneously, but close together. And what collectors most want. One case in point is Sir Winston Churchill's History of the Second World War. It was first published actually in the U.S., preceding the UK edition, but collectors want the UK edition because that's the one that has the final edits that Churchill wanted and includes maps.
Includes the maps, which the American edition didn't have maps. The American publisher wanted to get it out
first
quickly, and decided to go without the maps. And Churchill, I guess he agreed for maybe financial reasons, I don't know. But when they came to the British edition, it included maps illustrating what he was talking about. So that's the edition that people look for.
It also follows the flag.
Right.
Which brings us back to the Testament.
Yeah, you may hear the expression following the flag. When collecting, especially modern books, modern first editions, books printed in the 20th and 21st centuries, there are two schools of thought. People can go either for the nationality of the author, in this case, Margaret Atwood, Canadian, that the first edition was actually released simultaneously in Canada, Britain, and the US. So deciding which copy you want to collect, some people will follow the flag. The British people might say, well, I want the British edition because I'm British. Americans might say, I want the American edition because that's how it first came out in the US.
In the US. But a lot of people with Margaret Atwood will want to follow the flag and will want the Canadian edition, which is the rarest of the three, incidentally. But one oddity in this is Margaret Atwood won the Booker Prize for her book, The Blind Assassin. Collectors of the Booker Prize want the British one because that's the one that won the prize.
Right, as opposed to following the flag.
Margaret Atwood collectors want the Canadian.
Some collectors, of course, decide I'm going to get both just to be safe. But another interesting one is the Life of Pi.
Where the Canadian edition and the British edition are considerably different. Jan
Right.
Martel.
Yeah, the Canadian edition came out 2 years before the British edition.
In a completely different format.
Completely different format. The book looks completely different. But collectors want the British edition
if they are Booker collectors.
if they're Booker collectors. But they might also want to have the Canadian edition since it preceded it by 2 years. So it's a toss-up. It's a personal thing.
Yeah. So I think basically we should say that the value of a book is determined by whether it's desirable, how available it is, what kind of condition it's in, and including the dust jacket where that is there. Is the dust jacket present? How important it is to you and your collection.
Yeah. What is your personal preference?
And then on top of all of that, can you afford it?
Indeed, indeed. Keep in mind that you're going to have these books for a long time, probably, as a collector, and you'll be looking at them, and you don't ever want to be looking at something on your shelves thinking, I wish I had gotten the British or the American, whatever it is. So be happy with what you buy initially, and that should stand you in good stead.
Yeah. They always say that the book you never regret the books you buy. It's the ones you don't buy that you come to regret.
As booksellers, you might expect us to say that, but it's true. So often we find at book fairs, people will come by, and when the fair first opens, and they'll come by and they'll pass out stand and they'll see the books, and then an hour and a half later they'll come back and say, "Have you still got?" Oh no, somebody else bought it, and we have to say, like, I'm sorry.
We've even had somebody come back a year later say, "Have you still got?"
Yeah. And to be fair, I'll admit I have done the same thing.
True.
Anyway, I think we've gone on long enough.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Till next time.